pacifists. Oh boy, you want to talk about complicit with evil. You know, these are people who would say there's never a time to physically defend yourself. I mean, that's a pure state of self-loathing. Pure state of self-loathing. Self-defense is one of the two pillars of enlightenment. You have to understand non-aggression. The non-aggression principle is the sacred feminine dynamic, but then you have to step into the masculine energy of the self-defense principle. And you have to be willing to defend your rights and your life and your freedom. So pacifists are unwilling to do that. Defeatists, oh, we can't win. The government's too powerful. Yeah, the people say, what do you need an AR-15 for? Or an AK-47? You know, you can't defeat the modern military. Thank you. You can't defeat the modern military with that mindset. Don't speak for me. I'll take my chances with my AK. Okay? And I may die trying. But that means I died standing up to evil who's conducting duress without any right to do so. And I would gladly do that and follow in the footsteps of people who actually did that. Because they did what was right, not what was safe. How much more time do I have, or am I already over? Okay, a few more minutes. I'm in the last section. I just want to know how much time left, but okay. The nihilists, those who don't care about anything. The traditional religionists and New Age religionists that take this super right-brained approach that, oh, it's all, God's will, or all peace and love and roses and love and light. No, there's psychopaths and monsters in this world that we need to be prepared to defend ourselves against. The left-brain, egg-headed ultra-skeptics, the people who, they're super skeptical about everything. Look, I have a scientific background. I consider myself a skeptic. But when you're so overly into the left-brain modality, that's just as bad as a radical religionist, that you won't accept anything that's taking place right in front of you. You say, oh, that's conspiratorial. No, that's what's really happening. Yeah, they'll look at a chemtrail being laid down at 8,000 feet, which condensation conditions can't even format scientifically. They know nothing about thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. And then they're going to say, yeah, that's water vapor that lingers up there for 6 hours. Yeah, it's not particulate matter. And you say you're an ultra skeptic and you have a scientific mind. All of these people have one thing ultimately in common. They would never lift a finger to defend true freedom because all of them ultimately are cowards without the slightest bit of true courage. They're cowards. Cowards. And folks, that's a dynamic I also don't have the power to change, because that is internal spiritual work to develop true courage that needs to be done on an individual basis, where you develop enough self-love to say, I will not be stepped upon. I will not be enslaved. You will not take my rights without consequence. You may be able to take my life, but you're not going to take my rights without consequence. And if I have to inflict that consequence, I'll do it. Maybe you'll face consequences in the afterlife domain, should there be such a place, but I'll make sure you face them in the physical world too. Because I'm not going down without a physical fight if I have to. Real freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Most people love the comfort of their lives more than they love freedom itself. But possessions, jobs, homes mean nothing and are not worth, quote unquote, having when you are a slave. Because when you are a slave, you don't really have anything. Nothing is of any real value if you are a slave. The idea that what you have is worth anything in a state of slavery is a delusion which must be dispelled in order to overcome the cowardice of inaction and to develop the courage of a true dissident. Speaking of the Black Panther movie that Ivan took me to see last night, You know, there was a scene at the end, the truth comes through the mouth of the villains in these movies. That's Hollywood's technique to try to get you to think, oh, what he said was all wrong, when he mixes in truth with his psychopathic behavior. Very good psyop technique that they use in Hollywood. But the villain says at the end, when he's finally defeated by the hero with a spear to the chest, he tells him, we have the technology to save you. And he says, for what? So that you can imprison me? You know? And he pulls the spear, before he pulls the spear out of his chest and dies, he says, no, that's okay. I'll take the path that my ancestors who leapt off the boats in the mid-Atlantic took, because they recognized that death was better than bondage. And then he takes the spear out of his chest and dies. Now, I would certainly argue with the approach that he took in the movie, because he wanted to become the new king and oppressor. But they're putting words in his mouth that are absolutely true to get people not to understand them as being true, because the villain spoke them. You know? Big technique going on in Hollywood right now. There will never be true freedom here on earth unless and until that level of courage is developed within the human population. We already, quote unquote, have nothing left to lose. We have to say the lost word, no. There has to be a line in the sand where we say this far and no further. And let me tell you what my line in the sand is. When speech is curtailed or weaponry is begun to be removed or confiscated. Those are my lines in the sand. Because one makes my physical defense impossible, and one makes the communication of truth impossible. And we're seeing the first, and they're trying to get the second one done, but we're seeing the curtailing of free speech and censorship happening in this country that's supposed to be a land where free speech rights are protected. Because when the lost word is not accepted, and people will not back down when they're told, no, you may not come for my rights anymore, we have one recourse left, and I call that the last word. And let me tell you something, it's a loud, loud, loud word when it's spoken. It's going to be heard to the far ends of the solar system. And it's no joke and no game. You should look on YouTube at war footage and see what bullets do to the human body and what bombs do to the human body. You should psychologically watch it and understand it well. Because it ain't like it's depicted in Hollywood movies, folks. At all. At all. And that's going to come, this is going to come to America if we are not careful in how we proceed. And a big, big, big shouldering of responsibility comes directly down on the people who do understand this information that I'm presenting. Because if we shirk our responsibility to teach this widely and freely to as many people as we can reach, we're going to be complicit in what's going to happen. George Washington said, when any nation mistrusts its citizens with guns, it is sending a clear message. It no longer trusts its citizens because such a government has evil plans. Thomas Paine said, arms discourage and keep the invader and plunderer in awe and preserve order in the world as well as prosperity. Horrid mischief would ensue where the law-abiding deprived the use of firearms. The founding fathers of America explaining why it is necessary to have an AR-15 if the police and military have them. They knew and tried to tell us. See, this phrase is something I want to put out there more to help people to understand. Ultima ratio populi. It's Latin. It means the last reason of the people. Or as I like to refer to it, the last word. This is the final say and the final explaining of our rights to those who are oppressors and people who hold us in the condition of duress and slavery. And I do not want to see it have to come down to that. But if it does, just like the revolutionaries of America, I'll take that eventuality if I have to. Because it will allow for the future preservation of the understanding of rights and freedom. That was the blood sacrifice that the founders and revolutionaries did for this nation. Because without them doing that, the idea of true freedom could have been buried and gone from the earth. It was preserved here in a deeper fashion than it ever has been anywhere else in the world, which has allowed someone's understanding like myself to flourish and grow about what real freedom is because of the words they wrote and how they were preserved and how other teachings of many other brilliant men and women were preserved as well. That's what the role of real education is, and that's why conscious parenting is so important, to teach the young moral principles. But see, that's going to become harder and harder as they ramp up censorship efforts. And this is a very, very dangerous proposition for them doing this. And then advancing these gun control agendas in conjunction with the censorship. Now they're trying to control the very narrative. They're trying to control our ability to explain the reality of the situation to others. And they have no right to do this. People will argue, oh, they're a private corporation. They have every right to control this, that, and the other thing. No, they're acting as a public service, and they're allowing the propagation of one side of the story without allowing the propagation of all sides of the story. Whether the person's right or wrong, they have the freedom of speech to put their take out online. And YouTube and Google and these other evil corporations that are trying to control the internet are doing something that is going to lead to war. It's going to lead to war. Traitors. Yeah, they're absolute traitors to this country and its people. Absolute traitors. Because as John F. Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. And I would say self-defensive revolution will become inevitable, not violent. That's the only word he got wrong in that sentence. Yeah. Yep. And they're trying to make the peaceful mode of resistance to tyranny and the education of the population impossible. And when that happens, and we can't say the lost word, we're going to break out the last word. Let me tell you something. You think I'm a rebellious spirit about that? I've said before, I'm tame compared to the barbarians that exist here in America with guns. Let me tell you something. They'll fight with the barbarity of a legion of demons. They don't understand the force, the can of worms they're going to open up in this country. It's going to be, they want this blood ritual sacrifice conducted upon our own people. They want it. They want it, and they're going to get it. If we don't step up the effort to teach true morality to the people of this country, they're going to get what they want. Because as I've said before, only one side of a dialectic needs to really buy into the dialectic for the dialectic to be successful. Examples to follow. Jesus, the founding fathers and revolutionaries of early America, the black slaves of early America who fought back against their enslavers, and the anarchists of today are dissidents that embody that spiritual truth of the illegitimacy of rulership and the spirit of true freedom. We have to do the great work of first liberating our own minds from erroneous belief systems and see through the illusions that are keeping us all in a state of bondage. We must then begin the arduous task of educating others to help them to understand the principles of true morality and freedom under natural law. Because true freedom begins in the mind. And without an understanding philosophically in the mind of natural law, no true freedom will ever be found. We have to prepare for the worst. We need to recognize that deadly force may be required and cannot be taken off the table as a possible resort, because the people who perpetuate violence and slavery and those who ideologically support them erroneously believe that they somehow have the right to perpetuate this state of duress upon us, and they may never be willing to back down from these continued extreme violations of natural law. As I said before, there are monsters and demons in this world, folks. The spiritually destroyed may not be willing to back down. The employment of deadly force is a rightful response to the evil of slavery that we must maintain the ability to enact if necessary. And that is why semi-automatic weaponry is necessary. If there must be trouble in my day, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day that my child may have peace. Thomas Paine. Freedom is never given, it is won. Thomas Paine also said, those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigues of supporting it. I would say much like all people should undergo the fatigue of defending and supporting freedom, as Samuel Adams, quote, earlier said. Resistance is victory. This idea of resist not evil, not a Christian notion, and it's got to go. Of course we should be resisting evil and tyranny. That's what our lives, our very lives should be dedicated to that. Only 3% of the colonists actually fought and won the Revolutionary War. That's what the 3 means. I don't think I'm identifying with any particular group. It's like saying, oh, you put a cross up, well, that's identifying with this particular religious sect. No. It simply means the 3% of the American revolutionaries who actually picked up arms and fought physically against their British tyrannical oppressors. And they got the job done. Namely because the British were waging a war over an ocean. They were the people, yes, yep. The last slide is the next slide. They were the people like you and me. They were people like you and me that said no. If they came to these understandings and acted rightly upon them, so can we. Freedom is the highest spiritual truth. Fighting to defend it mentally and physically is our natural, inherent human birthright. Resistance to the evil of human slavery is not futile. It is the path to true spiritual alignment with the very laws of creation itself. Freedom is not a gift bestowed on us by other men, but a right that belongs to us by the laws of God and nature. Benjamin Franklin. Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Thomas Jefferson. It all comes down to liberty or death, folks. They're not just words. There are choices. Life on earth is not truly worth continuing if we are enslaved. This is what the phrase liberty or death actually means. Liberty or death are the only options. There is no middle ground. The truth regarding our situation is extreme. We must take an extreme position regarding our rights and our freedom and firmly root ourselves in that truth. Freedom is the gift and will of creation. When we rise to the defense of freedom, universal forces of providence will come to our aid. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Ivan Oyola.